Hey Martin, how are you? Can you hear me and see me?
I see you, I can hear you. Can you hear
I
me?
I can see you and I can hear you. You're looking good.
Oh, brilliantly. You look good. You look fine too.
Yeah, I'm in the wardrobe. You
It's
know
an
about
interesting setting you created there.
Yes, it is. Often I go with when I'm doing the YouTube things for podcast radio, when I've got the likes of Ross Williams or radio people, and I go with this background, which makes me look like,
Oh,
you know what I
right, yeah.
mean?
That looks very professional.
Doesn't it?
I haven't really figured out how to change the backgrounds with Zoom or Skype yet. But there's a lot of things you can do there.
It's pretty simple with Zoom. I mean, you just download a picture, and then when you go into the virtual backgrounds, there's a little plus sign. You hit that, and then you upload it. An interesting one is if you go to the BBC site, they've got pictures of empty TV show sets.
Oh, right.
So I could be on the TARDIS.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah? And when I interviewed Sean Williamson, he played Barry in EastEnders, I did that one from the Queen Vic, the pub at the EastEnders.
That's quite good as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had the theme. My favourite one, Julie won't let me use, but I like it, is this one. It's from the show Porridge.
Yeah, that looks like if you're in prison.
Yeah, but you know,
Yeah.
I used this one for. I did Ken Levine recently. Actually, no, I did one
Yeah.
with Podcast Radio on it. I did this version of it with Podcast Radio on it because I wanted it to look like London. But
Yeah.
one of the first things he asked me was, "Where are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm about 30 miles north of London." I had to come
Yeah.
clean. I couldn't pretend any longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A colleague told me that he always likes to match his background to where the person he's talking to is sitting, and so the people get really confused because it looks like if they're in the same sitting or in the same room
There's a
somewhere.
really cool thing you can do. You can actually add a video.
Oh, right.
And there's a quite a famous YouTube video. There's a guy on Zoom talking, and you don't realize it, but his backdrop is a video,
Yeah.
and he comes in and interrupts himself. He kind of walks in and goes, "Oh, sorry," and walks back
Oh,
out
right.
again, and it's himself, that a video that he's
Yeah.
done earlier.
Yeah, that's good.
That is pretty good. So anybody watching this that needs to be brought up to speed, we should say how you and I originally met. I'm guessing this was what, 4 years ago, or is it maybe more?
It was 2015, so
16,
five.
17, and 19, 20. Oh yeah, so yeah, maybe 5 years ago, depending on
Yeah.
what month it
Yeah.
was. So I'm at BOBfm. I'm doing the breakfast show, and I'm the program director.
Yeah.
And we're in Hertfordshire, and we're on DAB in Herts, Beds and Bucks, just 30 miles north of London. And we get this letter from a kid in Germany who says he's a broadcasting student, and the next part of his course, tell me if I'm getting any of this story wrong, but the next part of his course, he has to intern at a radio station, and he'd like to do it at BOBfm.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not just a broadcast student. I was a media student, and
Okay,
radio didn't really play that big a part at our university.
really? Okay.
But I just thought
So
it would
you
be
had the
fun.
choice of going to, say, the top newspaper or TV station in Germany, and you
Yeah,
chose BOBfm in Hertfordshire.
I did. Yeah. I just thought it would be a great opportunity to get to a different country. I always liked the UK, so I just thought I'd see if I could get an internship at a radio station in the United Kingdom, and
But
luckily,
you could have gone to BBC Radio 1, to Capital, to Heart. You chose BOBfm in a standalone radio station with the owner of the station was in the building with us. He was the general
yeah,
manager. It
yeah,
wasn't
it was just one office, wasn't it?
it was one office. The newsroom was basically the desk next to mine, and
Yeah,
sales was the desk across the way. It was
yeah.
one little tiny room in the grounds of Nebworth House. So how did you choose Bob?
Well, it was a great experience because the good thing if you're working at such a small radio station is that you can do a lot of things and you get a lot of opportunity to do things. And I think if you would do an internship at the BBC, I'm not quite sure what you would be allowed to do. Probably
Yeah.
not much. And so Yeah, and also because I said it was a standalone station, like you could decide what would go on the air, and you had a lot of freedom yourself as well. And if
Yeah.
you're a big station, or like one of the station that belongs to a bigger radio group, then you wouldn't have these opportunities. So yeah, I think it really made sense to go there to Bob for the internship.
And how had you even heard of Bob?
Well, I was just looking. Um, I was looking for radio stations in the UK, and just was sending out a couple of letters to a few of them. And yeah, well, one of them was BOBfm, and I listened to a bit of the music. I listened to a bit of your show, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought it would be good fun to go there.
So yeah, so a few weeks later, I'm at Stansted waiting for you to appear to give you a lift, and you ended up boarding with our cleaner,
I did,
with
yeah,
Joe in Nebworth, that which was really
yeah,
nice of her, because I remember she came in one morning, because there's something strange about radio, which is the breakfast show is prime time. That's when most
yeah,
people are
yeah.
listening. That is the time that all radio stations decide that the cleaner is going to come in the studio and interrupt things.
It's a weird timing.
But all radio stations do that. And Joe came in one morning, and I said to her, I said, look, there's this guy from Germany wants to come over and intern. I said, do you ever take in lodgers? And because I was just asking anybody. And she said,
Yeah,
yes. And then she got in touch. And so you stayed there. And then I would drive to work in the morning from where I live in Hitchin and pick you up from Joe's and take you to work. And
yeah.
and we used to put you on the air as well, telling jokes.
Oh yeah, it was the International Contest of Jokes. It was a bizarre thing. I mean, at one point it involved Christmas crackers and the German national anthem. I
Yeah.
mean, bad.
Because you see, in Britain, we have this stereotype that Germans aren't humorous.
Yeah, I don't get that.
No. Well, we proved it wrong in the International Contest of Jokes when
We did.
Bonzi, a local bloke who was well known for calling up the show and telling jokes, he would
Yeah,
tell a joke, then you would tell a joke, and I would award points. And I think it went for, it went for months.
it went for months, and it was on. I think it was on every day. So jokes we got through.
And some of the jokes were terrible.
Yeah,
Can
well,
you remember any of them?
not really, no. But I remembered at one point because I had to go out and do a few bits for the news as well. And I was
Yeah.
interviewed people.
Yeah. Oh, we got you doing everything.
Yeah, yeah. And this one guy was driving away. Just before I was driving away, he said, "Aren't you the German guy who's telling the jokes? And by the way, your jokes are much funnier than yours." So yeah, I'm not sure about the material.
I
But
think the jokes were funnier because of your delivery, which was, I think you would
probably.
describe it as deadpan. I think that was.
Yeah, yeah.
That
I
was.
mean, it was a great concept from the start to put a German on there to let him tell jokes. You know?
I met a German guy. His name was Otto, and he was from Leipzig. And I met him
Right.
at a radio convention, and he told me they had an English lady on their show, and they had her doing the weather, which he found hilarious.
Right, yeah.
And he was like, "We've got an English girl doing the weather," and I'm like, "Yeah, Otto, that's it." No, that's really funny, isn't it? We've got an English girl doing the weather, and I was like, "Yeah," and I couldn't work it, but to
Yeah.
Germans, that is very funny.
Yeah, because like for the UK, Germans are known for their sense of humor, and England is known for its bad weather. So because
Right,
it's always raining in the UK, which obviously,
right. So
but
to
that's
have an
another
English
stereotype.
weather girl is
Yeah,
very funny in Germany.
yeah. I mean, just imagine an English person announcing that the weather's going to be bright and it's going to be sunshine. I mean, that's just funny,
That
isn't
just sounds
it?
right. Like we could imagine a German bloke telling jokes.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the
definitely. I
same.
think it's probably the same
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, and I think that may have been where the idea came from. I don't know. I don't know.
Probably, but it's a weird idea anyway.
Well, we loved having you. Unfortunately, Bob's gone now. It's been gobbled up and
Yeah.
it's been heartified, which is a real shame. Are you finding the same thing happening in Germany, or there's the consolidation?
Not quite as much. I mean, it's really extreme in the UK, and I think it's a real shame because Bob was one of the very last true independent stations.
Yeah.
But, And in the like you've got these two big groups in the UK, and I think there are several groups in Germany, but it's not like this extreme. Like you do have more independent stations, but it's not
Because the
quite.
irony is one of those big groups in England is actually a German company.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure if they own a lot of radio stations here in Germany. I don't think so.
Are they more publishing? I know they're a publishing company.
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, like with radio stations here in Germany, it's more that you don't have just one company owning this radio station, but several companies owning one radio stations, and
Oh,
so
really?
it's not quite as transparent like it is in the UK. So you don't have these two big groups. So yeah, but I do think there are more independent radio stations. You certainly don't have these like chains, like you have several hard stations in the UK, and you don't really have this in Germany. Like, even if they belong to the same company, they would have their own brand and their own name and all the
Right.
rest.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I started out on the radio in Australia, and it's gone that way there now. The brands of, like, particularly Triple M has been rolled out here, there, and everywhere. And in the US they're doing it, but I think there are, as Ken Levine described, I think he said it was 3 huge bankrupt corporations running most of the radio, but the
Right.
stations do seem to have their individual names. So that looks like that's like a British and Australian thing, to have these brands, these
Probably, yeah.
Swans and Hearts and whatever, and then rolled them out as brands. Right. And it is one of the things I had to get used to coming to the UK was just how heavily regulated radio is here compared to Australia. And I used to think, when I first came over to Britain, 97, I thought that the regulator at the time, they were called the Radio Authority, I thought they were there to protect the BBC from too much competition.
Right.
When in actual fact, they're not. In fact, they're now called Ofcom. They're supposed to be there to help radio, which is very bizarre. Whereas in Australia, to get a radio, if a new license came up, it went to the highest bidder. That was it. In the UK, there is a real bidding process where you have to define how many minutes of news you'll take and how much local content and how many different genres of music you'll play. There's all these hoops to jump through, which people do to get the license. And then when they get the license cheap or for next to nothing, and then once they've proved that that's not working, then they change to whatever the hell it is they want to do. Whereas in Australia, it seems to make more sense, because whoever's got the most money invested in it is going to make sure that they do well.
Yeah.
But Britain, they still have these weird formats, and radio stations can get fined or even lose their license for not applying by these rules.
Yeah.
Whereas these are businesses. Surely they're only going to put on the air stuff that's going to get them ratings.
Yeah.
And if this is the stuff that's getting them ratings, then if you're saying you can't do that, then you are holding them back. You're not helping the business. So I think that with internet radio as well these days, I think Ofcom is becoming largely irrelevant. And I think they're getting the message on that, which is why they're not picking on the big boys so much. They're not picking on the Bowers and the Globals. They're picking on the little volunteer-run stations and finding them and bullying them over minutes of correct content and local content and live content and stuff, because the big groups are now so powerful. They need them to justify their existence, because they pay the licenses, which pays for their existence. How is regulation in Germany? Have you noticed what's going on there?
It's sort of in between, like it is in the UK and like it is in Australia. So it's not quite as heavily regulated, but you do have authorities who control. Like if your station has a certain format, you can't just change it.
You can't. See, in Australia, you could go to bed one night,
No.
2SM would be playing songs you grew up with, I think was the positioning statement. You wake up the next morning and it's just playing flat out, non-stop easy listening. And then 3 weeks later, you wake up and it's a country music station.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't work. Like if you've got a pop station, you can't just decide, oh, we're going to play jazz now.
Right.
I think there are regulations in terms of the news. Like I heard of stations which lost part of their licenses for certain areas because they weren't covering them enough in their news programs.
Right. And these are commercial stations, not public broadcast.
These are commercial stations, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how the public broadcasters are regulated. But also another difference is that you don't really have any national radio stations in Germany.
Don't.
Because you've got these several states, and these several states have their different like versions of Ofcom. So I think there might be different rules in different states as well.
You have regionalized regulators. Wow, they didn't even have that in Australia, which is a vast country. You know?
Yeah.
You know, to drive from, say, Sydney to Broken Hill would take you 3 days, and you're still in the same state. But it's the same regulator nationwide.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I suppose there are nationwide rules, but there are definitely local organizations which regulate radio. And also, like, you don't have just this one public broadcaster like the BBC in the UK, but almost every state has its own public broadcaster. So that's a bit of a ridiculous system. So in that way, it's just a bit different. But one thing which is much more regulated in the UK than it is in Germany, which I was sort of struck by, is bad language and that sort of things. Like, you wouldn't allow to say bad words in the UK because
no, you're not. No.
I think wasn't there this one scenario where you pretended that you kidnapped Santa Claus, and apparently that wasn't.
Ofcom. Along the way, I've had a lot to say about stuff I've done because it's a bizarre system. You only need one person to complain, and Ofcom will sit and have their kangaroo court. And it is a kangaroo court because the presenter who is supposed to have done this, now their job is at threat because the boss doesn't want to lose his license. And so if it gets too hot, the boss is going to fire the guy so he can say to Ofcom, oh, we've got rid of him now. We've dealt with that. He was a loose cannon. But one complaint. Now, if you do something on the radio and you get a couple of hundred complaints, well, maybe you should look at what you do.
Yeah, probably.
One complaint, you shouldn't even take any notice of that. The radio station itself should deal with it. I've always maintained that if you have a problem with a broadcaster, then you should contact that broadcaster. And if you don't get any joy from the radio station, well, then okay, take it to Ofcom. Yeah. But people go to Ofcom in the first instance and are taken seriously.
Yeah,
now,
that's a weird thing.
I've never complained to a broadcast regulator in my life. I do not know anyone that has complained to a broadcast regulator in my life. I have no friends who have ever done that. So the only conclusion that I can draw is the kind of people that complain to broadcast regulators have no friends. These are the people that are controlling media in Britain right now. Yeah, one complaint. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. That is really weird.
And of course, what happens is, if, for instance, there's a community station in town and they start off and they're run by people who have time to run them. So they're run by the unemployed and the retired. So they play a lot of heavy metal and jazz.
Yeah.
And they're not really a threat to the local commercial operation. Well, after a while, maybe somebody savvy comes in, maybe a program director with some commercial experience comes in and slickens up the sound a little bit. They're doing nobody any harm. They're a community not-for-profit radio station run by volunteers. Yeah. However, because all radio people are massively insecure, the program director at the local commercial station is like, what are they doing? And he complains to Ofcom. That's what happens. When it's a complaint over formatting, there is absolutely no way a regular listener would go, do you know what? I think they're playing too many 80s and 90s tunes right now. I'm going to complain to Ofcom. There's no way a normal person would do that. They will only complain about things they find offensive. And that's fair enough. You shouldn't be putting stuff on the air that offends a certain community. And that's why you should have the regulator. But all this formatting rules, it's just nonsense. And the way I know that I was at a radio station once, and it was actually a commercial radio station. A competing commercial radio station was becoming a very, very mainstream, and they had a niche format, and they weren't sticking within that format. I know the commercial radio station I worked on, somebody from there complained to Ofcom about this other station not sticking to the format. I mean, so, you know, they're not helping. Ofcom is not helping. And they've got ridiculous things like, you know, David Icke, who he's a guy who, I don't know all of his beliefs, and I'm probably doing him a huge disservice. But supposedly he thinks the royal family are all lizard shapeshifters or something. Anyway, that's David Icke. He had something to say about 5G I think it was 5G possibly causing coronavirus, but it was something to do with 5G. It mightn't have been about 5G causing coronavirus, but it was about the dangers of 5G, which he's described as it was invented for military purposes and it's a weapon. He had stuff to say about this, but it's David Icke, remember. David Icke is not taken seriously by most of the population, but a small niche, maybe a sizable niche, hang on his every word and think he's got the truth. But anyway, he's interviewed on London Real, which is a great online platform. Terrific American guy runs this site, and he interviews, lots of people, who've done things. And David Icke is a very, very interesting character with a very, and he does this interview, and it's online, so it's no big deal. Well, a portion of the interview, or perhaps the whole thing, I can't remember, is shown on London Live, which is a small independent TV station in London. Right. And all hell broke loose from Ofcom. All hell broke loose because that was actually broadcast. What's the difference? More people probably saw it on YouTube and on London Real site than saw it on this tiny little irrelevant TV station in London. But because that was actually broadcast, because Ofcom doesn't regulate the internet.
Yeah.
So it's totally irrelevant. And it was the same material exactly. So I don't know. I know Ofcom would love to be able to regulate the internet. So you're telling me that in Germany that you can, like, for instance, dirty words you can say on the radio?
You can, yeah.
Really?
No,
at any time of the day?
I do think so, yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't think that there are any rules against it. And also, like, bad language. I think generally in Germany or in a lot of countries, bad language is differently treated than it is in the UK. Like, you must be really careful, like if children are around in the UK, that you mustn't say any bad words. And it's not that much the case here in Germany. So if you would say it on the air, then that would be fine as well.
Wow. One of the great stories I heard about broadcasting in Germany, I think I might have told you, I can't remember. There's a guy called Dan O'Day who's a radio consultant in California. And he said there was a radio station in Germany, and when an American movie is shown on TV in Germany, often the actors' voices are dubbed into German rather than it be with subtitles. It's usually
most
dubbed.
of the times. Most
of the time. And they found the voiceover guy.
So there's this one guy, and he's the German voice of Michael Caine. And he's voicing a beer commercial, and that is just really strange because you always have the image of Michael Caine in your head. There's another one, I think for a big supermarket chain, and he's the German voice of Bruce Willis.
Right.
And it's just really weird
so
if
you're watching
if
a
you
commercial
hear like
for
Bruce Willis talking
supermarket.
about cucumbers for 99 cents or that sort of thing. So yeah, you get a lot of that.
Ah, that's good stuff. So things are going well. And what kind of format is the station then that you work? What's it called?
It's called Hitradio Antenne 1.
Hitradio Antenne 1. That's a good radio station name.
That's all right, isn't it?
What does it mean? So hit radio means hit. Is it hit? Is like hit music.
Yeah.
And the word hit for hit describing a hit song is the same in Germany?
It's exactly the same.
Right. So hit radio and radio is that's the German word for radio is radio?
It is. Yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah. And then antenna sounds like aerial or transmission or something, yeah?
Yeah, like an antenna, basically.
And that is the German word for antenna?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, that's
is just one.
Right. And it's hits, so is it top 40 or more contemporary?
Yeah, well, it's hot AC, basically.
Hot AC.
Yeah.
Okay, so it goes a little bit older, but it's got the newer songs that are AC.
Yeah.
And mostly German artists?
Not really, no. I think German artists have been a lot more popular in recent years, but there was a time where you could hardly get any German artists or German singing artists on the radio.
Is Nena still going with her bloody balloons?
Yeah, in some stations, probably not our radio station.
You don't play
other stations, like the radio station my parents listen to.
It's an oldie now, that tune. I was in New Zealand when that came out, and when it came out in New Zealand, it was the German version that came out. 99 Luftballons was the name. Yeah. But then I hear it on the radio in England, and it's 99 Red Balloons, and she's singing in English. Well, Luft means air, doesn't it? So they've even changed the meaning of it.
Yeah, because otherwise it wouldn't like fit the melody.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. I don't know why the English why they made her do it in English. Okay. So who are the big music stars that you play then? The German ones.
The German ones. Well, it would be people like Max Giesinger and
Max Giesinger. There's a good name too. What kind of?
It's all right.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of this kind of music because it's always, I don't know, it's really boring. But I think the issue is like a lot of things sound a lot cooler if you translate them into English. Certainly for a German person, because I don't know, it makes it sound a bit better. But if they have the lyrics in German, you realize a lot more that a lot of the lyrics aren't really that creative or that clever, and that just makes the song sound less good, I think. So that's
right. I think that as a songwriter, they're a little bit more limited, aren't they? Because the vocabulary isn't the same. We've got more words for the same things. So if you're writing, I think English has more words, whereas I think, so if you're writing words, you've got a choice of words you could use. Whereas in Germany, you may only have the one word for something.
I'm not quite sure if that's really that big of a problem in that scenario.
Right.
But I just imagine, like, if you've got pop songs like from, I don't know, Ellie Goulding or Katy Perry, like if you would translate them into German, then most people are probably wouldn't want to listen to them because the lyrics aren't really that great, are they? So I think that might be a bit of an issue, that because we are used to listen to a lot of English music and or songs where people are singing in English, that it's just, I don't know, it sounds a bit strange if you hear the songs in German.
Yeah. Okay. So, finally, what are you looking forward to?
Right now? In terms of
just anything.
Anything.
Just before we get there, lockdown for you, because Germany was ahead of Britain in this being a problem. So I'm guessing you're ahead of us in coming out of it too, yeah?
We are, yeah. Well, it's been really confusing because there have been so many changes to the rules. Like, I think just this week, like the regulation has been changed 3 times. And a lot of shops have reopened and restaurants have reopened, and now you're allowed to meet with 10 people outside or with 20 people in your own house. And so, yeah, things are a lot more relaxed than they are in the UK. But
Bundesliga is back too, isn't it? Although it's behind closed doors. Ours still isn't back. Football is back in Germany.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. Like basically just the large events like big music, like concerts or things like the Oktoberfest, they are banned. But other than that, a lot of things have been allowed to reopen. But as I mentioned, like Germany has 16 states, and all of these states are allowed to make their own rules.
Right.
So, even though I work in the media, basically, it's hard for me to keep up with how the regulations actually changed just in our state. So it's a bit of a mess if you look at it nationally.
Wow, I thought ours was confusing. If you've got it in, did you say 16 different states?
Yeah.
Wow, and different rules in each one. So you could cross the border and find you're breaking the law.
Yeah, it worked quite well at the beginning because then really the regional leaders, they all got together and said, well, we need to have these certain rules for the whole of Germany. And it worked well in the beginning. Like when we entered lockdown, like the rules were quite strict, and this worked well. And also like now in shops or public transport, you have to wear face masks, and this is also a rule that has been set nationwide, and that worked quite well. But in terms of getting out of lockdown, because then every state is allowed to basically make their own rules, it's getting a bit more confusing. So luckily the numbers have been really low recently, so that's not that much of a problem. Because but yeah, it's just a bit confusing the way that they relax the rules actually.
Okay, then. So obviously looking forward to coming out of lockdown fully. What else are you looking forward
Definitely.
to?
Well, I'm just looking forward to the weather getting better because it's been quite British in these days. So I think that's something to look forward to.
Well, if you ever need an English bloke to do the weather on your radio station, I am available.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to contact you.
Okay. Martin Heer, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Here it is.
Wenn man ein herkömmliches Bier trinkt, dann klingt das meist so: Gluck, Gluck, Gluck. Wenn man dagegen ein Altgiersbacher Klosterbräu genießt, dann hört sich das so an: Glück, Glück, Glück.
It's
And
basically,
when you hear that,
a regular beer, it sounds like this: Gluck, Gluck, Gluck. But if you're drinking and then the name of the beer brand, it's like it sounds like this, and he basically says luck, 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 because it's well, Glück, which means luck, which is sort of similar, sounds similar in German, and it's just ridiculous. And it's also, I don't know, the type of beer your granddad would drink. And so for Michael Caine, I always imagine the butler of Batman, doing
right?
this.
Yeah,
It's
Alfred.
ridiculous. Yeah.